Good evening, everyone. Hi. We're so pleased to have you join us for tonight's unprivate collection conversation between artists Ericka Beckman and Matt Mullican. I'm Joanne Heiler, the founding director of the Broad Museum and the Broad Art Foundation. The Unprivate Collection series began 4 years ago, 2 years before we opened this museum, as a way to introduce the Broad to Los Angeles audiences by inviting artists to discuss their work in this collection in their own words. Artists have engaged with a wide variety of cultural leaders through our conversation series. Past conversations have included Thomas Housego, Kara Walker, Robert Longo, and Takashi Murakami, as well as musician Flea, filmmaker Ava DuVernay, critic Hilton Als, and musician and writer Henry Rollins, to name just a few. We had hoped at the beginning of this talk series that these events would inspire people to come to the museum itself. That has happened. We've had over 1.3 million visitors since we opened under 2 years ago. The Broad is now the thriving destination, serving a wide audience that our founders envisioned, Eli and Edie Broad. Now a bit about this evening's program. Our conversation tonight brings together two artists with a deep connection to LA, Ericka Beckman and Matt Mullican. Filmmaker Ericka Beckman began working in the 1970s as part of what would become known as the Pictures Generation. She attended graduate school at the California Insititute of the Arts, originally as strictly a visual artist, a more traditional artist, but quickly changed her focus to film. Like other Pictures Generation artists, her early films explore the relationships between people and images, how images structure people's perception of themselves and of reality. These early films featured Ericka herself, as well as a rotating cast of her peers, including James Cazebier, Ashley Bickerton, Mike Kelly, and of course, Matt Mullican. One of Ericka's extraordinary works, You the Better, is an essential part of our current show at the Broad downstairs on the first floor, called Oracle. In Ericka's film, games with vague, shifting objectives are enacted by a team of uniformed players, some of whom you might recognize. The games seem to serve as an off-camera betting entity or house. The film's characters seem powerless to affect the outcome, even as a soundtrack eggs them on to strive for more. The film dates back to 1983, but feels uncannily relevant today, and actually is a very recent acquisition for the collection. Ericka is joined tonight by visual artist and fellow CalArts alum Matt Mullican. Born in Santa Monica, California, Matt received his BFA from CalArts in 1974. His art practice focuses on systems of knowledge, meaning, and language. Through drawing, collage, video, sculpture, and performance, he works with the relationship between perception and reality. Kind of see a theme here between the ability to see something and the ability to represent it. We're thrilled to bring Ericka and Matt together to discuss their shared experiences at CalArts in the 70s and how Los Angeles and Southern California identities have featured in their respective practices. A couple of quick practical details. First, please silence your cell phones. And note that tonight's talk is also being watched by an online audience via live video stream at thebroad.org. Hello. We'll also have time for a short Q&A after the conversation, so get your questions ready. Finally, I'd like to gratefully acknowledge our leading partner, East West Bank, for their generous support of tonight's program. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Ericka Beckman and Matt Mullican.
Thank you, Joanne. All right, here we are. Okay. Okay, well, what you see on the board happens to be a card about this big. I recently, I'm in a show at Secession right now where You the Better is also playing, and a young girl came up to me after the screening and gave me this card. And it was a card that was designed by a friend of hers who had seen the film in Portugal. And there was this kind of young, sort of rebellious sort of audience that really loved the film, and she made this card for me, and I thought it was like a really good gift, you know? And it just was surprising and wonderful. So I brought it here tonight to kind of just open up the discussion, the event. But more importantly, I asked if I could bring Matt Mullican to join me in conversation, because Matt and I have shared many, many conversations deep in the past, in our formative years when we were both starting out in New York in the late 70s, early 80s, and really at a point in time where both of us were in what I call our incubation years, when we were formulating the kind of structures and ideas that would sustain our work for many years to come, and still actually are relevant to both of us. And for that purpose, for the purpose of that early conversation that I want to have with Matt, I found these drawings in my notebooks that Matt and I did together, and I think there are a total of maybe 5 of them, which we're just going to cycle through.
When do you think they were done?
They were done there were 2 that were done in 1978, and 3 that were done in 1982.
Okay. I think they were done in your big black loft.
Okay.
Huge, monstrous loft that Ericka still has.
Yeah.
It's how many square feet is this thing?
1,800.
Well, it's forever. It's at that time, it's giant. Low ceilings.
This is about the size of it, yeah.
And it was big. It was really big.
Yeah.
And it was empty, nothing in it.
Made so that you could make a film in it.
It's a soundstage that she lived on.
Yeah, I decided not to get the windows so that I could have a place to shoot in. And since the film is primarily with a black background, and I needed places to construct props and also places to shoot, and also all these things had to be done in this one dark space. But I never thought I'd be there for so many years and living in such a dark space. That was 1978 that I got it. So we did these drawings.
40 years ago.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
40 years next year.
Yeah. But that sort of complements my life prior to that, because I was a military family child, and I moved every 18 months. So I really became stable in that loft. That was like the moment I said, okay, this is where life as an artist begins, essentially. Well, yeah, got the loft. But anyway, let's talk about these drawings a little bit. What do you remember, Matt, about doing them together?
I think they were about your work and about the relationship, our work in a way, together. And in thinking about the film that you're showing here, and choosing. There's one where there's an arrow on something, on a ball, and there's an infinite pattern there. That looks like a keyhole. There's see there you have the men and see the arrows on the ball there?
Yep, choosing one.
So choosing one, and then it's framed.
Yeah.
And so these all have to do with taking some object and embellishing it to the point of where it becomes more than the others around it.
And you choose
Which
it.
is what the brain does. The brain doesn't look at everything as all equal. Everything has a place and a time, and it goes like this. And in seeing your film just now, something that I'm really interested in is, how does the brain think? How do we think? What do we go through when we are in our daily lives? And this is when we're thinking, we think all the time. It's not like we stop thinking when we don't remember. We are always thinking. And my thought is that your film is about this process. Your work has to do with this process.
But I remember really early on that, like at this period when we were developing our work before even showing it, that you and I were talking about the relationship of the self in a very abstract way, like not looking at myself as Ericka or you as Matt, but thinking about what is the self in the world and how does that self learn things. And
learning, the whole process of learning. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to my early work was done at this period that these drawings come from, which is like 1977 was when I started the early work and finished about 1981. And that all predates the film You the Better, which is downstairs. But this period was about, for me, was about how to learn about language formation and really literally how you think about forming a stable sense of identity, a stable sense of your relationship in the world, and also a stable memory. And so this sort of coincides with me needing to be stable after being like having moved around so much in my life. So it was an emotional time to be concentrating on something, and I also wanted to concentrate on how to do this in film, to do things that were just based in action so that I could identify with an audience, I think, through action by doing something. I sort of think that you ignite that mimicry possibility, the idea of mimesis, that you can speak across to somebody by showing action. And that was like the fundamental idea, and I wanted to base all these films on how to use action to develop a kind of conceptual a framework, okay, about learning, about the self, about self in the world, and about memory. And Matt, in fact, was in one of my films. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
The early
we
films.
filmed it at the Phillips house. In the driveway.
Yeah.
And my brother, who's here, was also in the movie. You had us buy white shirts. We went and bought white shirts. And one of the first times I met Mike.
Yeah, Mike Kelly.
Mike Kelly. He was one of the people running this obstacle course that you created for us to run in.
Yeah.
Basically running back and forth, having to have these objects and giving them this movement of getting something done. Not that we were doing anything, but we were representing getting something done and competing doing it. So in a way, we're representing what we usually do, but somehow with the understanding that nothing really is getting done.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful experience. And I think, when was that?
That was 1979. It was the film, The Broken Rule.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So that predates the film downstairs.
That definitely predates the film downstairs. So this period of working on what I call the Super 8 trilogy was, like I said, a period between 77 and 81. And I think I became motivated to work in film primarily because of a camera, an apparatus. This one little camera, Super 8 camera, because I was shooting Super 8, that allowed for rewinding. And it was a Fujica, and it allowed you, like on an audio cassette, to completely rewind the film back to any point in it. And because of that, and that's the only reason I made film, was because I could use 2 timestamps, meaning I could work with an imaginary sense of time and a real sense of time. I could work with those 2 timestamps in a frame. And I wanted to do that so that I could see the relationship between 2 things that don't belong together, that didn't happen at the same time, what they do when they make contact. And this idea of just being able to look into these intersections of events and find meaning in that was really important to me. And it allowed me to think about causality as being something that we learn about and that we're programmed to see it, and this is how we build narrative, et cetera, et cetera. This is how we learn things, is cause and effect. But I was making my own cause and effect. I wasn't thinking about untangling it in the world. I was thinking about using dance, performance, animation, and live action together, slowed down movement with sped up movement, to look at what happens when they are in the frame, whether they are competing, behaving together in unison, or just what happens,
Kind of two realities, one
Two
on top of the
realities.
other.
Yeah.
A first reality and a second
right.
reality, and then they flip. They go, the first becomes the second, and the second becomes the first.
Yeah, or they work out some relationship, but that is all about what narrative is about.
Well, the first films I saw of yours, I remember them being black and white and really elemental, almost made in the 1920s. They had this quality, this bleached white that was in them. The black and the white was very strong, and very much about dreams, having to do with sleep and dreaming and upstairs and downstairs, and being able to, and reminding me very much of ghosts as they were represented in the 19th century with double exposures,
Yeah.
ghosts leaving the body, that you had this ghost that occupied the same space as the real person. And in a way, the ghosts in this film downstairs are signs. The sign that comes in, it's like that second reality that's on top of the first one.
Right. The film downstairs is, yeah, maybe I should talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
Since we're here with it, I think we'll start with the storyboards. We're going to start with the first group of storyboards. I thought it would be very interesting to show not the actual shooting script or not the storyboards, but the concept boards for the film. And because this is like this shows a little more of the process. You're going to, as I talk about things, you're going to kind of see, not going to see direct images, but you're going to see correspondences or things that I've been thinking and working on as I'm making the film. So after I made the film with Matt, I knew that I could use game as a substitute for narrative because they shared a tremendous amount of the same qualities, okay? And I knew that I wanted to work with gambling, a gambling game, for many reasons. And one was because I wanted it to be interactive, and I wanted to get the audience directly involved. So there was a position for the audience in the film, which was the better. And why I'm doing this film on gambling is because I was fascinated with chance, and like, why is there chance? And why do people like say there's no chance? And why are there so many games that deal with chance? And why are we excited by it? Because I was excited by it with those films with the double exposures because I looked at chance events that seemed real, okay? So I was very interested in the notion of why we're attracted to chance, and I decided that it would be a gambling game that I would work on. And so the first, I wanted also to build a film that started with very simple games like dice, and prediction games, and then get more and more complex as players moved in, and the players are starting to work out strategies to understand the gameplay and to succeed. So they're all directed, all the players in the film are directed to trying to learn what the rules are and moving through the game as the rules are changing in the game. And while that's happening, the signage is going out to the audience directly to imply that you're the better and these are the guys you're betting on. And so they're going to be playing a game and you're supposed to figure out like whether they're going to make it or not. Is their skill up to par? Can they really do what they're doing in the game? And by making the film, I also did chance. I played like a bit of a game role myself because I was doing these double exposures. So I would have the targets and balls and hoops move in the frame, and then I would put the live action character in and I would see what would happen. And I used that to say, okay, this is the beginning of an action, this is the complication, this is where it gets difficult. Okay, this is when he's succeeding, and this is when something happens that's a result. So I was able to like make these chance sort of juxtapositions make some kind of sense. And so I was playing a game with them, with the film itself. It was that process was really wonderful. And We can go to the next set. And so all the sports that I was looking at in terms of researching for the film had to be physical and had to use a set of motifs that were consistent. So in the very beginning of the film, if you've seen it, it starts with a large housing complex that then explodes into a subdivision that then spreads out over the land. And the model house is speaking to the audience and is saying, buy one of me. If you buy one of me, you can have one of me, and you will be on this land. You will be part of my mission to expand. And then the subdivision gets to the end of its expansion, to the barrier, to the border, and the house says, well, what do you do when there's nothing left at all, and there's no other place to go? So you become virtual, you become points, you become abstract, you become this other entity that you can move and market and push. So that little song and little animation in the beginning is sort of the reason for doing the film, and also like a way of just sort of summarizing what I'm trying to do with the film and give you a little introduction to some of the themes, which come back much later. But the house motif is there for the whole thing, and the balls are the continuity. So if you learn, as hopefully the audience does, that the ball is a point, you begin to understand that these signs in the film represent things, and those things change, but they're continually activated by the players and the games. We can go on to the next set. So these
are working drawings for the film itself.
Yeah, some of these things end up being in the film, like the stack of coins and the yellow ball. But a lot of times in the drawing for making a film, the drawings for making the films are often concept boards where I see if the themes are strong enough that they'll sustain and they'll last through the film. And oftentimes I simplify the film when I'm shooting it. So the process of drawing is to work out all the ideas and then to see if they're strong enough to sustain a production, because a production's a very specific task which takes a lot of energy, a lot of time. And if I'm not, I need to be kind of assured of what I'm doing before. So they're process drawings.
Because when you see the people represented on the drawings, they're signs in themselves.
That was conscious.
And which they are in the film as well, the way they're dressed, the way, the uniform, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So they are not, they are signs, because they are visual. We're looking at pictures, and you're very aware of the fact that you're looking at a picture when you see them looking like that.
Right. But they're also players that are playing a game for somebody else. So they also are, the idea is that they are invested in what keeps them active in the game, which is these fantasies about strategy and control and survival in a way.
Didn't they just want to win?
They want to win, but that's also survival.
Well, just this idea that the player in the game is not really thinking about playing the game so much as just playing to win.
Yeah.
You're trained, but you are in it.
Yeah, but and in this case, because the game is changing on you, you're looking for the strategy to win. Now, that winning idea becomes kind of interesting because they only see one level of the game, and now we have to talk about levels. There are levels to gameplay, and there are levels to what's going on in a deep game structure. So one level is that they're just playing to follow the rules to make the hoops, to make the balls go through the hoops. We can keep going. This is me working out this idea of distribution. So it's hard. They're playful drawings. I hope that they just sort of accompany this in a light way. But I introduced the roller coaster here, and then we could put up photograph number 1. That image on the bottom left will show you how it gets translated in a shot in the film. And so I have here a roller coaster that is delivering the chips to the house. And the first time that you see the house in the film is only when the chips from the better go to the house. The house is not a really recognized in the film yet as the gambling casino. So we can now go to the next set of storyboards. Yeah.
So choice is, again, really a big deal here.
Yeah, the idea is that the bettor or the audience would then sort of predict like where the pointer is going, and then the guys in the film start playing this game with abstract houses going by as targets, and they're trying to figure out where to land the ball to hit this target. So it's all, people are trying to make choices about what they're doing. At one point in the film, I think in the very, very center of the film, Ashley Bickerton, who's the main character in this game, decides to take a completely different position than where his players are, and he sort of gets into the center of this sort of roulette wheel, which has been the place where the balls are dispersing from. Okay, like the center of the wheel, the balls go out, they catch them and either hit a target or not. But anyway, he takes a completely opposite point of view, which was really interesting to me in making the film, was to think about the spatialization of this game board, that there was a deep periphery, then there was a line of players, and then there was the center of the film. The center of the film was where the balls came from. And Ashley takes that position and begins to see the probability of the balls going to the house. And he's trying to, he's exposing everything to the players. But meanwhile, the chorus, which is really important, I think, to the film, is kind of training him to think about what he's doing. And he goes through this whole process of being the most perfect athlete that you could be. And it's all sung as in, it's in his head, he's singing the song, or the words are sort of helping him think and concentrate and focus on his action to make this perfect hit. Mm-hmm. And he does it, but then he sees that it quickly fails, because every time there's a probability, every time he hits one, there's so many will go to the house. The house is way in the background, and none of the players see the house. And then he starts to talk to them about where that house is and how the game is. You're not looking at the game properly. It's fooling you, And so they, because of the distance, like the echo in this room, they can't hear him properly, and his words are mixed up, and they hear other things in what he's saying, and they think that he's making fun of them. So they pull back and they grab the ball and they move on and they eliminate him in the game. So that's a very important center section, and then we head into the basketball game, and that's kind of what these boards are about. So we can go to the next set of boards, because I think this finishes up the dialogue section in the middle of the film. And then we're on to playing basketball, and we can put up photo number 2. And the team now is really charged to play this new game, this new basketball game, and it's another whole process of learning again a new game on a field. But what happens in this part of the film is really important to me, because I bring back the motif of the house, which is the subdivision that's trying to expand. And instead of everything going around in a circle, now it's moving linearly through space. Mm-hmm. So we have on the ground a basketball court logo that's lines on the basketball floor. And you have the basketball hoop. The hoop motif is back, the ball's there, the house is there, and everybody's playing a new game with the same motifs. And they're learning that they have to put the ball through the hoop. It's not a basketball net, it's a hoop. So it's okay, got to figure that out. Once they make that, the wall goes up and there's a new court. So they're in this process of expanding where the houses go on the deck, on the basketball deck. So we could put up photo number 2. And then, no, that's number 3, but that does, number 2, there you go. So they're very energized by this game, and they're trying to figure out what they should be doing. And they realize that they just have to lay up hoops and they just keep moving. And there's one ball for each court. There's a chorus now that's like singing, like, okay guys, get the ball, keep moving, don't stop here. They're playing this elegant little dance game in the court. They're loving what they're doing, they're all coordinated, and everything's very like, you know, joyful because they like what they're doing. And they remember they have to put the ball in the hoop, and then that opens the field, and they try another dance pattern, like basketball as dance pattern in the next court. And the cheers keep going, come on, get the ball in hoop, let's get that house on the lot, let's keep moving. And eventually, we can go to the next photo, please, the third photo. And so at one point in this set of courts, the one-armed bandit comes in. And that's a double exposure, and that's a chance thing, and I'm shooting a lot of film of guys throwing balls at this one corner in the set. And sometimes the chips come down ahead of the ball, sometimes the ball goes through the legs of the bandit and the chips come down. But all these little relationships of like what happens first, second, and third were really kind of important to me and kind of created this dynamic of like, this sense of kind of freedom, I think, that it doesn't really, it's not overly determined. This is just a very, what's happening here is that they're diverting from one choice of a basketball hoop to another hoop, which is through the legs of this guy. So the one-armed bandit in gambling is when you hit that one-armed bandit playing at a what do you call those things? A slots, you get all the money. So now the money is like going to the bandit or maybe the bettor, and the house, which is delivering the balls, it has a set of balls to play this game of expansion, the balls are being used up because the guys are playing on this one field and handing the ball over to the bandit. And therefore the game stops because the money goes out of the system and not to the house, and the house shuts the game down. And that's the film.
The narrative.
That's the narrative of the film. Yeah.
You all got that. I never did. I mean, I've been talking to Ericka for 40 years about what you're doing, and it sounds, I mean, it's so much about politics, and it's so much, when you're talking about the house, the system, what happens, how things change. The revolution is even in here. What's interesting, in a way, that I said you anticipate virtual reality in this kind of this work, and Ericka said no, it's not virtual at all. This is completely the opposite of virtual. This is analog. This is light. This is film. This is double exposure. I'm crude. This is not computer. This has nothing to do with computer. But I'm talking about how we look at it and what is important. I saw on the outside of a bookstore, Printed Matter in New York, I guess it must have been the early 80s, and it said, it was a little poster that was on the window, and it said, in the future, all books will be maps. And there was a fuck no on, excuse my language, but there was a scrawl on top, because what's happened is that everything is going to become more and more literal. And virtual reality makes things much more, it seems to. But what's interesting about this is how abstract it is. Mm-hmm. Because to think about how we think is very abstract. To make that jump into our brains and to second guess. I was telling Ericka just in the other room that I remember we had a cat when I was growing up, named Speckles. And this cat was walking up a path where I grew up in Santa Monica, and there was a staircase that goes up to the front of the house, and a staircase that goes up to the back, and goes up to the back of the house. And the cat sat there and looked at the front of the house, and then the back of the house. And I was looking at this cat, and I said, what's the choice? There is a choice, and the cat made a choice. The cat, Speckles, went the back. Didn't go up the front, went the back. And in a way, your work has to do with choice. you know, and actually winning, whatever that means. This is all really a part of it. But I want to talk about my own work in relationship to your work, you know, because we're both very much involved with signs. And in the same period, like in 76, 77, I became very much interested in the context of signs, similar to the game as a context of signs, the way you're doing it.
That's right.
And I'm not going, I didn't go to the game part of it,
Right.
but I was really interested. I've been trying to, I invented that game with Alan McCullum, that suits, that was much later. But I just, so I said, okay, so there's some drawings of mine where I had caps on there, and I had flags, I had caps, I had t-shirts, I had buttons, I had banners, I had all this stuff.
All the stuff from
with
game.
nothing to say, really,
Yeah.
but I was interested in the form of all this language.
Which also, the insignia on the back of the uniform came from Matt directly. I mean,
Well, the sign of signs.
I just borrowed
It's my
a
sign.
of
It's my sign of
a
signs.
Yeah.
And in my own work of many worlds. And so this is, and in talking about my own work, in that period of the 70s, the late 70s, and what people thought about what I was doing. And this is before computer games, and it's also before computers, and this is before all of that stuff. And people used to think that my language, my work in language, and that would apply to you, was really, I mean, it wouldn't because yours is moving, mine didn't move. But they thought I was referring to China or Egypt or, you know, all of these old cultures. And it had nothing to do, it had to do with what was about to happen. It had to do with the zeitgeist of the time, which is really anticipating what hits 15 years later. And so I was creating a language that looks, in retrospect, exactly like an interface for a computer program. I mean, it is exactly. And when people look at this work, there were no, I mean, in seeing a show of mine recently, people had always thought that my work was all about my own little universe. And it really, to a degree, my philosophy says that the universe starts here. And so, of course, I don't disagree with it, but I think it's a bit of a put down when they say that I'm really an inventive, quirky artist. And I said, okay, look where you are, and I say, look at this, and then I say, and then look at this. You know, look at this, and then look at that. This is done 35 years ago. The work that Ericka was involved with and has been involved with back to when I first met you in 74, 75, I don't think your work is just and my work as well, really, I mean, it's anticipating something. It really is. And what's interesting is that you're looking at motivation as an abstract thing, and you're representing it as an abstract thing, because the house wins. We understand that the house is always going to win. And then when the house doesn't win, the game's shut down.
That's right. Right.
That's pretty simple.
It's very simple. Where the audience felt they were in the film, and that was important to me. So, in a sense, it was.
What do you mean?
Okay, like when I made the film, I knew I wanted to make an interactive game. And this was '83. There was just models of interactive games, just thought ideas of, like, what could an interactive game be? I mean, games are interactive. I mean, it's an interactive, it's an interactive activity. But I wanted there to be something on the outside that felt like they could be involved in the gameplay. And that was why I placed the better in the audience. That was the downfall of the film when it premiered at the New York Film Festival in '83, because audience that saw it at the New York Film Festival started to scream in the middle because they didn't want to see sports on. They didn't want to see sports, and I was booed and shooed, and the place came down, and the film played, but people were like screaming, and it was exactly what happens in a sport event. So, but anyway, this idea by the end of the film, I really wanted the audience, if they could have been there in '83, to scratch their heads going, what did I just do? And what really happened in this game? I want to think about it. Like, I want to think like what my position and role was on this. And basically, the idea was that hopefully you see that the players aren't achieving what they hope they're achieving, because they're just playing the rules in a capitalistic game. And the better doesn't really come out ahead either, and the whole thing just sort of falls apart.
But when you look at it, I mean, we're talking about, later on, you're talking about avatars.
Yeah.
Become very important later on.
Yeah.
And here you have the person, and there you have the avatar. I mean, you have this double reality that you're representing.
Right.
And in a way, the difference between this game playing and the game playing that we've known for the last several hundred years is that in a game on a field or a game with a board on a table, I am talking, we're doing it together. I am playing you. But in this game, I can be playing, that, as you say, the house, which is really the game itself. Mm-hmm. So I can play chess with the computer. That's the computer, and that's me. Mm-hmm. Because the whole ground has shifted into the medium as being an active part. And that's what the iPhone, obviously, when I bring it out. But in a sense, this is done. I mean, that's what I'm so interested in, is the motivation for this representation, this abstract representation. What is it that you're representing? I mean, it's political and it's sports, there's something else there that I'm really was always intrigued with and really interested in. It's just because also the way that you chose this kind of cartoon reality, and sports has that quality in it. It is a kind of it's a second reality. It's one that everyone can, you win in sports, whereas you don't necessarily win. You do win in commerce, and that, I guess there's a relationship there.
Well, I think. I wanted to deal with play and this idea of how important play is to us. It's important when we're a child, and it should be important all the way through life. And I just thought, there was a certain part of me that was thinking about how to change people's attitudes about the structures that govern our lives. Maybe a slightly kind of revolutionary thought, but then again, I'm from the, late 60s. I grew up, going to the Chicago riots. I participated in SDS. I have a background in kind of being active politically. So film was a medium for me that I thought if I could just figure out how to make everything work as play, that possibly the identification that people have with my film through understanding it as play would allow them to start loosening up and maybe beginning to think about the structures that govern our lives. And it's really important.
But you're doing it abstractly.
Yeah, I do it abstractly.
You're not literally saying,
No, but when you play, you work, like as a kid when you're playing with, you have a representation which you're communicating with the other person with, and we can talk about this because of Glenn. So Glenn is a stick figure that Matt created that was very similar to a doll that a child would use that would interact with another person, and you would place yourself in that doll, and that doll would go out on an adventure, and would come back, and it was a life that you lived through this other thing. So play, that form of play, for me at least, sustained my life as a kid because I moved everywhere every 18 months. So my play activity with other kids became like the sort of where narrative started in me. And my interest in this idea that you could use a representation to be yourself.
Well, and seeing, I just wanted to make this little point because as we were again talking and kind of thinking about what you're representing in here and these choices that are being made, and I do think it's similar. It's kind of a thinking. It's almost emblematic of the brain and choices that we continuously make, as I said, because we don't stop thinking ever. Even when we're listening, we're always thinking. At least I think we are. And I think. But the point is, okay, so if there was this person, Temple Grandin Smith, who was is Asperger's, and she says that she thinks in pictures, that she does not think in words. And I listened to her, and then I said, golly, I know I don't think in words. This is for sure. I don't think in words. And I don't think I think in pictures either. In fact, I know I don't think in pictures. So if I don't think in words, and I don't think in pictures, what do I think in? And then, of course, Caspar Koenig says, you think in thoughts. We'll just call it that. You don't worry about it. What is it? And I said, and in a way, we think with our bodies as much as we think in any other way. We think in how we feel, whatever that is. And our motivations, our thinking motivations, are very bodily. They're very physical. And in a sense, what this whole thing is almost a kind of emblematic of body thought or body thinking, if you can say that.
I think that's really great that you said that, Matt, because that is the, I mean, that's really true. I think, I was trying to figure, there's this common thought, phrase, what is it? Action speaks louder than words.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of prove that that is true, that you could actually, through gesture and movement, and you could develop a language. I mean, dancers do that. There's a language to choreography that dancers learn, and then dancers unlearn it. Musicians also learn temporally. But so anything that uses our body, that uses time, and it teaches us something, and we hold those dear to us. So often, if you're trying, as an athlete or someone involved in action, if you try to think about something that you did, you think about what it felt like. Like, what does it feel like to make a circle around an ice skating rink perfectly without falling?
Yeah.
I mean, you can think it, and it's there, but the feeling is there, and it's in your body. And I figured that we hold all those things, and why not just ignite them and put them together so that instead of there being language, you just display action.
I was talking, and I teach in Hamburg, and I'm a professor there, and you're a teacher, you're a professor, and just talking to the students, and one of them, this whole difference between we're talking about representation, and how the difference between something being presented and something being represented. And one of the students said, but there's a big difference between presenting something and representing something. There's a gap. In the representation, there is memory, and there is there is a sense of reality that one is representing. I was told, I gave a lecture in Zurich recently, and someone came up to me and afterwards and said, the notion, the concept of reality was first really thought about in the 15th century. So reality was not a concept. this concept, and reality is a huge concept these days. I mean, we've really jumped into this idea, and we are swimming in it. You know, and again, there is a reality that you're representing, but this was, I don't know where I was going, but this notion that comes up in this work, and this whole idea of what a reality is. I'm interested in cartoon realities, and so therefore I'm very curious about what you're up to here.
Yeah, we did a lot of, I thought those early drawings were like cartoons because they were so...
Well, you know, one of the things that you mentioned to me when we started talking, because we've been talking on the phone here and there, trying to figure out how we'll discuss things, was the fact that neither of us really were into photography, and our so-called generation really ran with that. And we kind of didn't keep up. Because our brains were involved with something else. I'm more interested in...
It's still about how to present the world, how to present the world, how to present the world. I mean, I think photography is... I mean, I chose to work in film. It was a long upward battle to figure out how to use...
But it's not just film. You were in what was this New York Film Festival thing you were in?
Yeah.
Those were filmmakers.
Those are filmmakers.
You're not doing what they do.
No, I wasn't. No. But I have to say, music and the performance scene. I know performance was really a good portion of your early work.
It still is.
And it still is, right?
It still is. Absolutely. It's the first. I think what I do is tell stories, and the first form of storytelling is what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And what I do.
Yeah.
And my performance is related to that.
But it's really first person, and you're really one-to-one with the audience. I mean, there is nothing in between you and the audience in your performances. They're very direct.
Well, I work with hypnosis, so it's, you know, I'm out of it.
Right. But I think there's this whole part of art history, I think, that's really important, which happened in the late 70s, early 80s. That, I mean, there's a lot about the pictorial representation during that period and how it shifted and et cetera, but there's many things that are happening at that time that deal strictly with temporal art, like performance art, music, and dance, that hasn't really found its way into, you know, into like the whole history of that time before 1980, before the galleries, like, you know, took over in Lower Manhattan. And so I thought it might be kind of interesting for this discussion just to talk a little bit about what we drew from that, all that music, all that performance, all that temporal work.
Well, we both went to CalArts before. I was in CalArts before I went to New York.
Right.
And Baldessari made it very clear to me that I should leave Los Angeles and go straight to New York. And I did my third year of school, and I graduated. And then I moved immediately, and that's what I did. He also told me to go to Europe, and I did that as well. But we all moved to New York, and it was a bunch of friends, and there was a lot of people from all over doing all kinds. You had poets, you had musicians, you had composers, you had, you know, actors, everybody kind of together.
Right.
And it was, and that was wonderful.
Yeah.
All these bands, like you filmed these bands that were playing downtown, all these things. There was friends of ours, Paul McMahon and Nancy Chun. And Nancy was at CalArts when it opened. She was Paul Brock's head. I mean, she ran the show. She ran the art department, really. Nancy did. And so later on in New York, they had a loft, and they would have parties where everyone would go, and the party would end up where everyone would break up into different rock and roll bands and play music. So you would have a band with Barbara Kruger, Eric Fischel, and David Sally, all playing music. And, you know, David was playing the vacuum cleaner. And And, you know,
Yeah,
and
it was sort of a place where Paul would like work out his music for an audience. And then when that was over and he played his new songs, then all of us would. And you were
the battle
a
of the,
performer.
I was a drummer.
You were a
I
drummer.
was only the drummer. I never did anything but
And I was
hit
a backup
things.
singer. April Gornick and I were backup singers. Anyway, I thought it might be fun before Q&A just to show a little inside track piece of music by, Barbara S. and Glenn Branca in Paul McMahon's loft in 1979. This is a group called Static. That Glenn Branca is the main guy here.
Yeah?
Yeah, that might be fun.
Yeah.
This is a band called Aesthetic.
Nancy was crazy. We had rats in our building. This was downtown New York in the 70s, and there were literally, I remember rats coming out from underneath and she named them. Ricky and Rhonda Rat. This is Headache.
This is a band called Aesthetic.
you, the better.
Yeah, so that's where we hung out. All right. So I understand this is Q&A time. Yeah.
So you wrote and performed the music in the piece downstairs, right?
In what?
The piece downstairs.
Yeah, that's me singing. That's
It's
me.
very different from this no-wave aesthetic, so I was wondering if you could just talk about that.
Well, the no-wave aesthetic is, I mean, basically, this is the music that I listen to and the people that I would go see. But but there's a lot of repetition in those sounds downstairs. You'll hear it. Things are just going over and over again. That idea of that need for representation is also kind of a training mechanism, so that you can kind of be trained to understand what's being said, and also what they're doing. And it operates both internally and externally, like internally to the players, that kind of like training to play a certain way, and then the training of the audience, I think, to understand the film. But that's all lyrics that are really like all the writing in the film came from directly out of newspaper clippings from like sports talk. And I mean, there's nothing in there that I wrote myself except for the lyrics. Those are all my text. But I don't know. What do you think? What's the difference? How would you describe the music in the film downstairs? I'm kind of curious.
You seem to be harmonizing, which
Yeah.
is a little above this.
Yeah. That's because, okay, let me.
I was struck by it. It was quite beautiful.
Well, thank you. That's really great that you said that, because I worked with a composer at CalArts. So when I went to CalArts, I went there because of John Bergamo, because of the music department. It wasn't, Baldessari and the art thing was just great, but I was there to collaborate with musicians. They were all learning they were all like deconstructing classical music, and I was into percussion. And so I wanted to work with musicians that were in the percussion ensemble at CalArts at the time. And I found one who was also a composer. And so he was able, Brooke Halpin, and he was able to help me take the lyrics and turn them into like the right vibrato to go with the kind of percussion that I was doing. So the way we work collaboratively is we'd start with a linguistic phrase like, chance makes it so that things just can't go back. And then we would build on that, and he would do the rhythms, and we would just work together. So his voice is somewhat in that film, but mostly it's mine, yeah. Then he and I went on to do much more work together, and before that we did work together. So this collaboration with a musician was like key to me early on, yeah.
Your storyboards.
Yeah.
When you are creating your storyboards and you're talking about narrative and you're talking about abstraction, do you look at your storyboards and get a narrative of emotion at all, or do you see only abstract?
Abstraction.
Abstraction.
Totally. It's all about, in that case, it's whether motifs are solid enough to last. And this is maybe hard to understand, but there were a lot of, like the films, maybe I started the film in '82 and I started drawing, and I drew large scale drawings, and eventually they came down to this size of like 11 by 14 storyboard. But it was all about trying to figure out the logical system between the motifs and the actions and all these things that had to work together sort of almost mechanistically as a composition, okay? And then the music became much more emotional for me, like, and then working with the characters and getting them kind of to do things, that's where, but the emotion was there in the very beginning to make the film, because I wanted to do something that, like I usually make work about things I'm kind of pissed off about. That's sustaining, right? You can like work it out. It sustains you for a little bit. Yeah.
I'm very interested in the question of craftsmanship and craft, because you both are drawings, and in those days,
Yeah.
the question of craft was very much attacked. Glenn Branca is a very good example of that. I'm making music the other hand, there is a sense of precision. And so I was wondering, if you had learned at CalArts the classical draftsmanship, or this is something that you had learned since you were a child, and how do you find yourself, when you talk about finding yourself, in the beauty of this drawing? I mean, where do you exist there?
Okay, that's a really nice question as well. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I went to like Washington University prior to CalArts, so I was trained in drawing, a very classical Bauhaus art training school background. So I learned drawing there. Didn't even do it as a kid. So that training. But anyway, the point being that the film had many different types and styles of drawing, and then the film before did and the film after. So drawing for me is really when I'm finding my style and form. It's just very personal. I think it's exactly the same way any artist uses drawing. It's like a one-to-one thing that, the process of working with the hand and trying to visualize at the moment in time with your thought process is so fundamental. Like not thinking big structure, not thinking about the whole thing, but just trying to work out the moment you're in, the moment you're thinking about right then and there, and then accumulation of these drawings, and I'm not talking about storyboards, I'm just talking about drawing over a period of time. That's when I would begin to see that it's weakening, like a motif that I'm working on is weakening. That's going to go, because if it's not strong enough in the drawing, it's not going to make it into the film. So
if I may add something, this is also something that adds to the distinction between analog and,
yeah.
and digital, because there is the sense of working with one's hands, which some animators seem to do, like painting and
Yeah.
glass and
Yeah.
so can you comment a bit about that with the inside the camera and
Well, I think for me, the idea of doing everything in production is really important, and I still feel that way, and I actually don't want to lose it, even because, I mean, yes, it's right there. You have to work with the computer and compositing, but I don't even think of that when I'm trying to do. I think it's really vibrant and important to do as much in production, so that everyone is together, and everyone is. When I say that, I'm also, I'm not trying to contradict myself by saying that I worked with these double exposure animations at the same time, but that the fact that for me as an artist, I'm building the set, I'm shooting in the set, those people are in the set, they know I'm telling them what's going on in the animation, they're interacting with it. Whatever they feel like they should be doing with it. And that's all in production. Nothing's in post. There's not a thing in the film that's post. Okay, nothing. It's all just cut film, all in the camera, many trials to get things to line up, and then using all those mistakes too, because they also say different things. And I could build a narrative from a bunch of mistakes and make them turn right, So it's editing. And production, yeah. Not post, yeah.
This question is for both of you. Both of you use color that seems to be very strategic and opaque. Can you talk to us about the psychology of color as it applies to your work?
Well,
You start.
Your color is up there.
Yeah.
Well, I use it symbolically in my work. But it's I'm using it, I have 5 worlds in my work, and they're 5 colors: red, black, white, yellow, blue, and green. That's it. And I use it across the board. And cadmium red, very strong colors, very flag-like. I make flags. I've designed flags in this period. I was making flags. So the colors were really as strong as I could get them. But again, there are others, of course, other uses of colors, which in different contexts, watercolors, which meaning something else, but the emblematic use of color is very specific. And I think that's how Ericka is using it. She's using it emblematically. It's almost iconic, the use of color. It all has, like the caps, those little...
The caps become the game board.
It's all very game-like.
Yeah.
And in my work, it looks like a big game board. I have my 5 worlds, and people think it's either a soccer field, a basketball court, or a tennis court. And again, that is something that we share. That was invented for me in the late 70s. I invented this game board, and then I was trying to figure out what kind of games I could put on there, which is I could collaborate with you to come up with a game to put on that game board, because that's where we back and forth.
I think this idea of virtual comes back in this discussion right at this point, because in the film that you watch downstairs, there is a sense of architectural space that even though it's all black space, most of the film is shot in black, there is an architecture to it. There's a direction, there's movement, there's left to right, there's backwards and forwards. And that was keenly implanted in my mind and I could not have made the film the way I made it unless I had that diagrammatic sort of game board space. And I knew where the circle was, where the roulette wheel was in relation to the house, where the players were. This all was very carefully mapped out in my drawings. And like I said, that reference was really important for me, and it helped me direct the film and kind of be there. And the colors are the same thing. They operate on the same level of just providing a kind of cohesion so you could follow certain motifs as they change. And they stay intact because they maintain the same color. So it's helping you to kind of keep track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's a particular use of color. Color is much bigger than that. Of course. But this is a very specific, because symbolic use of color.
Yeah.
Do you use primary colors more so because of the visual impact?
Yeah.
On the audience?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you understand it as language more. the whole thing becomes, something else. It becomes like a visual language, the way it is in your notations. In a funny way, the notations represent the film, and the film represents the notations.
I like that. Spoken from a wise man. Terry has a question.
A lot of your films are sports-like and game-like, but there's so many qualities of sports and games that they don't have. There's no resolution. You never really, as a spectator, I never know what the rules are, no matter how many times I see them. It's not, I don't even know who's competing for what, right? Spectator sports are all about understanding. It's all about ritual and.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, do you have an idea of what's going on that spectrum that we don't that you withhold from us?
No. Tyler. No, what I'm doing is like building something very simple to get very complex. And it is a representation of the game. The game serves the purpose of the underlying premise of the film, which is to sort of understand the politics of capitalism. That was what at the time I would say that, and I still say it now, although I'm learning more about that now than I did back then. But the game was to be it wasn't to be totally believable. It was this other world, this game world, okay?
Right.
And yeah, I used sports and I got kids, my young actors, to do that because they thought they were playing a game. And I asked them, well, you know basketball, so let's do basketball, but add basketball with dance. Or you know this game from childhood, let's reenact that game from childhood. And they would just go back into that moment and play that game.
I mean,
But I guess I'm not answering.
well, no.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a little clear, but when you watch sports or games,
Yeah.
in a sense, you're kind of there in the moment, but in a sense, you're not in the moment at all because you're just waiting to see how it comes out, just like on air.
Mm-hmm.
But in your film, you're totally in the moment all the time because it's not going anywhere. It's right. I mean, not.
It's not going.
I'm
It's
not
yeah.
criticizing. I mean, I love
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah, you're not going to the end result of a game. You're going into the game to sort of understand what is that, the dynamics of the game.
I mean, but you're kind of asking yourself as you're watching it all the time, like,
Right.
what's going on?
Yeah, why am I watching this game? That's what the audience at New York Film Festival. Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, games were for me, I believe that they were the same as narrative, because that you're working with a set of cause and effects. You're working with how dominance plays in, like who becomes dominant, who takes the lead, what are they trying to achieve, do they achieve it, you know? That even though that you don't believe the game itself is real, you can feel the energy of the players, and that points you in a direction of feeling like it's a game. I'm sure of that. That I know, because I felt it when I directed it. Yeah. But it's really very conceptual, you know? It's not about, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes?
I know you were talking about the significance of the player who gets eliminated from the game.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if there were other motifs that the other players were supposed to represent. And if so,
Wait, I didn't hear the last part.
if the other players that are in the game, if they were supposed to represent like specific motifs as well, and if they were.
No, the ones that are eliminated in the game are really. I knew that it's all structural, like it's all like they were scheduled to leave, so I had to get them out of the game, and I had to figure out a way to get them. That's what that's about. Nothing more than that, really. But actually leaving the game was important because he did have to leave. He was on his way back to Hawaii at that point, and I knew that I had him. I had him in the beginning, and that's why he's all puffed up. I don't know if you've paid any attention, but he gets very skinny in the middle. So in the beginning, he's in the East Coast at one part of his life, right after CalArts. And then he goes to Hawaii, and he comes back skinny because he's working with Jack Goldstein, and he's like burning both ends. So anyway. No, he had to be eliminated. Some character who took the role in the film had to be eliminated, and it was Ashley. And he's a very, Ashley's really smart, and he understood what I was trying to do. And so he got it. And so that was important to me, that he would like portray every
It's interesting
moment that I wanted him to portray.
It's interesting in relationship to his work. I mean, the Susie series was
Yeah.
being done not long after this.
No, very close to it.
Yeah. Very emblematic kind of deconstruction view
a view of what a worker would see when delivering art, like the backside of art crates and things, and all the sports and iconography of the sort of middle class upbringing of America in the 60s. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's interesting to bring up the idea of context back then, because I think I first saw your film at the Bleecker Street Cinema, which was showing experimental film, and most people who worked in film in the art world were doing experimental work. Your work didn't quite fit into that category. artists from spaces happened, they became kind of the context for a lot of this work, and I thought maybe it would be interesting for you to talk about it. We're talking about virtual and all of that, but that didn't exist. So
Yeah.
we made work for ourselves in studios and lofts, but where did we hope they would end up?
Right. Well, that particular period in time was interesting because I didn't fit into the American avant-garde, and I didn't even want to be. I learned from it, but I didn't want to show in it in that context. And so luckily there were these, along with what I feel is like my incubation period, there were all these great venues like the Kitchen and then Artist Space, Franklin Furnace, and then all these shorter run spaces in Lower Manhattan that people would purchase for very low rents for short periods of time in order to do cultural activities like a tax write-off type thing. So there was like a place for experimentation, tremendous amount of, and I felt I belonged there. And like the best place I showed my film at was like I kind of considered, I wanted always to be showing with dancers and performers. I thought if I showed with a performance artist and a dancer and the film came on at the end, that would be a glorious way to do it. And that happened through the Kitchen. In 1981, I showed with some dancers that went to a festival in Rome, and my film played in a tent. And that was a happy moment. And that's kind of what I wanted to hope. I was hoping that the downtown performance scene would actually kind of grow together. And I was very idealistic, but I wanted to see that become slightly stronger and have more presence than it did, because it ended up sort of becoming other things and being incorporated into other programs. Very, very little of that kind of exists now, even though they're strongly holding on to it. So it really wasn't until, if we're talking about context, it really wasn't until about 2009 that things came back again for me. And then a younger curatorial audience, a younger audience, in fact, saw the work and decided that it would be time to bring it back. And so there's more of an understanding, I think, of my work now than there was back then. It's like amazing to me that people understand and respond to it, because back then it was.
I remember. Like you. Wow.
Yeah, that's where we do have that in common. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Yeah.
I saw your work for the first time at the Cherry Martin Gallery.
Oh yeah.
A while ago, and then after seeing this work downstairs, I'm really fascinated by the relationship between your video work and the sculpture and
Okay.
pieces.
Yeah.
Could you talk more about that?
Lovely. That's a great way to end it. Thank you. So anyway.
Also the
Yeah.
video of the sculpture pieces and at the same time the audience.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about this, the drawing phase, there was when I was making this work I was always thinking about like how to spatialize the film, because I was within the art context. It just wasn't possible with any kind of film projector to do anything as a loop of any length. So I had this problem. My films were long. They're 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And the looping wasn't a possibility. The video, I didn't like video. You know, it was just video on a monitor at that point. I wanted full-scale film, characters, life-size. But I drew what you see downstairs, I actually had in a sketchbook. If I ever could make the film with sculpture, this is what it would be. It would be a set of these houses. In the drawing sense, it would be the houses that are receding into the black. And it would be the same sort of POV of the main character. Okay, it's not necessarily spatialized that way in every installation of it, but that was the idea. There were times where I played out, well, I'm going to use ramps and hoops, or I'm going to use these houses. And when it came time to show the work in a gallery, I was able to do that. And so basically, it's not an invention. It's actually just kind of going back to an idea I had before. So the way that started as an idea was that I wanted two houses to register the start of the animation and end in that section where they're just flashing red and green. And I also knew that I wanted to do a set of houses that would change as the film progressed, so that it went from something decorative to explain a subdivision to this moment, this optical thing where you're thinking that the animation in the film is generated from the two colors. And then I wanted it to represent sort of the scoreboard where they all pile up. So, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.